When I was young, a very peculiar thing used to happen. 4 times a year, some person, some salesman, used to come to my door, ring the bell, and then try to sell me an encyclopedia. Right? And for most of you that are in the age range of 22 to 30, you know what I'm talking about. There used to be these people who used to come door to door trying to sell you an encyclopedia. And the thing was that I would never buy an encyclopedia. Because I was young and I had access to the internet, if I ever wanted to learn about something, I'd simply Google it or at that point use Yahoo. And I would never ever use an encyclopedia, right? So I would never use a text encyclopedia. However, that didn't prevent the person from coming, once a quarter right outside my house, trying to ask me, hey, Varun, do you want to buy this? So I was also pretty young and there was no way I'd be able to afford an encyclopedia. And I don't think, I was in a state of mind at that point to ask my parents for something like this. So my question, and I used to ask myself this a lot of times, is why would this person come 4 times a year to try and sell me this? Was he waiting for me to suddenly change my mind? And then now that I'm doing sales almost a couple of decades later, I realized what was happening. Right? And I realized the importance of selling the right thing to the right person at the right time. You see, people have varying needs, right? And those needs change according to time, but you can't sort of predict what kind of needs what kind of person would have. But you can sort of predict what kind of needs a person would have. So in this episode, we're going to learn what the meaning of social listening is. How can we listen for other people's needs, and how do we reach out to them only at the right time rather than sending out touches when it's not necessary and it's not required? Let's find out in this episode. So touches and social listening. Like we've spoken about before, touches means, when you reach out to somebody and they reach back out. Touches, we're going to learn in this episode when is the right time to reach out to somebody. So people in companies have something called buying windows. People aren't buying something all year round, right? So let me give you an example of real estate because I've been looking to buy a house right now. I looked up some houses in the Whitefield area in Bangalore. Then I looked up some houses in the Sarjapur area in Bangalore, and I was just looking at them, right? And then at some point I decided, okay, it's too much information for now. Let me go and do something else. And during that period, I got a lot of ads. Many different builders started sending me ads for different houses, right? And I started looking at all of those ads and I said, wow, this is interesting, this is interesting. And then I said, okay, let me sleep on it. Let me not take a decision right now. And then over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I got busy. I got busy with work and I started doing other stuff and I forgot about the housing idea. And none of these guys who had sent me an ad in the beginning decided to follow up except one builder, right? That builder specifically sent me a video and said, we know you're buying a house. Do you want to buy it right now? Here's a beautiful property that we're building. It's an entire experience. We can take care of everything from, tomorrow, if you want a tennis court or a basketball court, if you want a swimming pool, we have all of that, right? So that person kept retargeting me because you see, people have buying windows. And for me, the buying window to buy that house was a pretty short one, but it's something that was frequent. It would come up again and again and again whenever I felt, something wrong with my current house. Whenever I, think the house is dirty, I'd say, what, if this is my own house, I take much more care of it, right? So I had a buying window. So let's assume you may want to buy a vacuum cleaner. And I'll show you the example of a buying window, right? Let's assume you want to buy a vacuum cleaner sometime this year. It's not an urgent need right now, right? So you don't buy it. You just go on Amazon, you look at a vacuum cleaner and you're like, yeah, this is interesting, but it's expensive. I don't need it right now. Someone reaches out to you, suddenly you get a call, right? And says, hey Varun, do you want to buy a vacuum cleaner? And you say, no, I'm not interested right now. I was just checking out some vacuum cleaners. Not interested. I'll come back later. 2 weeks later, say you come home and you find the carpet messy. There's a lot of dust on the carpet. 5 minutes right after that, and you're very irritated that the carpet is messy. Just 5 minutes after that, the same guy calls you and offers you a vacuum cleaner at a discount. You are much more likely to buy and buy instantly when you have an immediate need, right? So try as I might as a salesperson, if I try to sell you a vacuum cleaner when you're out holidaying in France, you are just not going to buy it during that period. But if you're at home and you're staring at a messy carpet and you're feeling the feelings of anger, and that's when I call you and try to sell you a vacuum cleaner, you are very, very likely to convert. So if you've been through the self and performance part of this course, you'll realize that in different emotional situations, people are actually different people, right? They change. And you have to target not just a person these days, but also a person at a particular emotional state, right? So in this case, you're trying to wait for the person to have an emotional state of anger towards, their house because it's dusty, and that's the right time to sell a vacuum cleaner. But it's impossible for you to know when somebody has this problem. It's actually pretty much impossible for you to know when somebody comes home and the carpet is dusty, unless, you've placed a spy camera on them. So we don't know that. So we can't usually tell when someone has a need for what you are selling. So the traditional strategy has been to reach out to them in specific spaced windows, right? For example, every 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks, or once every 6 months. And you do that for many, years or months or whatever. Like we'll come to exactly what these buying windows are, and hope that they have a need at one of your touches. So if I reached out to you every 2 weeks and asked you, hey, do you want a vacuum cleaner? Hey, do you want a vacuum cleaner? And in one of those 2 weeks, somewhere in the last 2 or 3 days, you had a problem with dust, then you might convert, right? Especially if I came to you and said, hey, I have a discount for this vacuum cleaner right now, but only if you buy it right now. Because you have a need and you found an opportunity, the buyer has a need and found an opportunity, they're more likely to convert. So we've spoken about the idea of touches in brief. In enterprise sales, there's this cool concept called the double tap, which is a process of leaving voicemail and then you follow up with email. So before voicemail, you can also call the person. So if I want to target you in the morning at 8 a.m., I'd call you. And if I don't manage to reach out to you, then I send you a voicemail and say, hey, I'm selling, software. Then at 8 p.m. in the evening, I can send you an email and say, I'm the guy who's called you in the morning, or I'm the guy who sent you a voicemail in the morning, because that adds a little bit of familiarity. Usually this is done every day once a prospect enters a sales rep's pipeline for 8 days. Believe it or not, in the US, if you're selling enterprise software, you will call in the morning or go to voicemail in the morning, do a email in the evening, and do that straight for 8 days. It doesn't come across as spam because you have to be very personalized, right? Unless the prospect says a hard no, you then start reaching out to them once a month, right? So if a prospect says, maybe a little later, then once a month you continue reaching out to them after the 8 days are over. So the 8 days tap, and you can call it double tap, you can call it double touch, it doesn't matter. The 8-day tap is less about selling, but more about making the prospect familiar with your solution so that they have recall when they have a need. So people think you call and immediately say, hey, I'm selling you this or I'm selling you that. Instead, try to call and build a relationship. Try to call and say, hey, I know that you have a problem. You're looking for real estate. And I just wanted to chat about, if there's any way I can help you. I happen to know a little bit of real estate around. I'm not selling you anything. But I want to know, what is your idea of a perfect home? Right? Because my idea of a perfect home is, a garden and maybe a swimming pool and maybe, a couple of dogs, but I want to hear what your idea of a perfect home is, right? So you keep building a relationship so that tomorrow when they're deciding to buy a home, or when they've decided to buy a home, or when they have a need to buy a home, they remember you because you've had a few conversations with them. And that's what sales reps are about, right? That's why I think the English language today is so important, because the better your control of the English language, the better you are able to sell. The monthly taps, which is after the 8 days, once you actually start reaching out to them once a month, that is about proper selling. So then you don't call and ask about, maybe in the second month, you don't call and say, hey, what's your idea of a perfect home? It's about saying, I know you had this idea of a perfect home. I found just the home for you. Are you interested in looking? I can send you a WhatsApp text or an email. Just check out the house. It's amazing. Now, if some random person does that, I would get irritated. I'd be like, why are you calling me and telling me about this, or, telling me you'll send me a WhatsApp message? But if somebody who's already built a relationship with me over those 8 days is sending me this message, I'm more likely to convert. One of the oldest companies in India, LIC, which sells life insurance, one of the main ways they actually used to sell life insurance is by making people sell life insurance to their family members, to their immediate family members, cousins, relatives. It doesn't matter, because it's easier for you already have a relationship with your relatives, right? So it's easier for you to sell something to them. And that's how LIC takes advantage of this. A lot of these multi-level marketing companies do that. But I'm not a big fan of that. Like, I feel like, at some point, even if you went through that approach, you'd hit a rock, you'd hit a limit, right? And if you wanted to tap into a new network, you need to hire people who had big family networks in that place, and then they might not come work for you because it's not an amazing job to have. So better sales reps know how to build relationships from scratch. So let me give you an example of an immediate need. We've been speaking about this. Try to reach out to somebody when they have an immediate need. Try to reach out to somebody when their carpet is dirty. The only way you'll know if a person has a need is if they say it themselves. Unless you have a spy cam, then we're in some whole different world. But the only way you'll know if a person has a need is if they say it themselves. People in companies express themselves primarily to their friends, right? We know that. They talk to their friends and social media. That's one of the beautiful parts about social media, because people want to express themselves. People want to put up a status saying, hey, I'm just eating food right now, or hey, I just landed in this awesome country right now. Social listening tools allow you to keep tabs on certain keywords, right? Usually it is fastest finger first. So on social, if I say I need something and somebody reaches out to me and then 50 other people reach out to me, the first person to reach out usually makes the sale. On LinkedIn, I made a post and I said, I'm looking for a graphic designer. Any leads would be appreciated. And I got hundreds of comments on that post, but I responded only the first and second comment, right? So fastest finger works best. And there are a lot of tools that allow you to do social listening. And I'm not going to get into those tools because you can just Google it. You can just type social listening tools. And there are a million tools you can find. Many of them are free. We're not going to go into that. So which social media? Right? This is a question that people often ask me when I say you can look at social to find out somebody's needs. So which social media are we talking about? Any place where you get instant updates is a good place to watch. And there are many buying signals or triggers that when a company needs something. One of them, for example, is funding news. One of the times when my sales team will send you an email, especially if you work in a company, is right after you raise funding. Right? So if you raise your Series A or your Series B, we usually don't go after seed stage companies anymore. We go after Series A and Series B. We'll reach out to a Series A company and we'll say, hey, congrats on getting funded. If you want marketing, we can do it for you. Right? And obviously our pitch is a little more sweeter than that. But the buying signal is the fact that the company raised funding. More buying signals are when the CEO quits. Right? So you can set up news triggers. In one of the first videos in Meta, I taught you how to put up news triggers. What you should do when you make these target accounts or target prospect accounts. Remember we did that exercise where we figured out the buyer persona, who the company is and who the person is in the company. Let's just say if we are trying to figure out which are the companies we need to target, I would take all of those names of those companies and just put them in the Google News alerts, right? We already learned how to put out Google News alerts. Just put all of them so that every time something new happens at the company, you're able to reach out to the CEO or, some VP level executive of the company and say, congratulations on that, right? And companies do a lot of this press, and going to Google News and looking for the company's press is very important, because that allows you, when you call a company, instead of you randomly saying, hey, I really like your logo, which is dumb, you can call them and say, congrats on the funding, right? And congrats on the funding it builds instant rapport, or congrats on, hiring 30 new people. Whatever press they're putting out, it's good for you to chat with them about it. So choose the channels with the least amount of noise. For a certain company, job boards are noisy, whereas Twitter will be the least noisy. If you want to look for a job, the best place to look at is not a job board. You can't go to naukri.com or, and I know this because I've run a job board, right? We served 4 million requests, and here's the thing, it gets really noisy. If you're a big company, like say if you're a Google, and I put out a job as a Google on a job board and I get millions of applicants, it's just too noisy, right? There's one person or maybe a team of 10, 15 people who goes through those applications, right? At least the first pass. And it's hard for them to pay good amount of attention to any CV, and all CVs look similar these days. So start learning to differentiate, but the point is, go for the least noisy channel. So if you were applying to a startup, the wrong place to apply would be their job board, right? It would not be to apply to the startup on LinkedIn or their own startup.com/jobs page or /careers page. None of that. Here in this episode, I'm going to show you a secret technique to find jobs, right? So let's do that. Let's just check if we're live. We're live. So cool. So we can actually go to Twitter, and I'm going to go to Twitter. This is my Twitter, and I can literally search for looking for developer. I think about it. If I'm a CEO and I want a developer, I just post a tweet saying I'm looking for a developer, right? So let's just look at it. And as you can see, I'm looking for a highly reputable software developer who I can pay to build our community of software. Then you have many people who say we are looking for junior developers. Just look at the number. And these are all in the last 24 hours, right? This was on 18th. This was 18 hours ago. This was 10 hours ago. This was 7 hours ago. So we are looking for an experienced web designer and developer to design and create. And this was in City of New York, right? This is City of New York Council. So you can look for a developer anywhere, like a development role anywhere, right? But the best place to look at it is Twitter, because people are not replying to these people. Like, think about it. On a job board, a post would have hundreds of applications, but here it has just like a few, right? I don't think any of these have. I don't think any of these people. I think this one is a serious application. But imagine you replied to one of these tweets, right? And you just put up a short video saying, "Hey Ben, I'm really interested in this role that you guys have put out. I'm willing to work remote, and here's my experience." And you show a couple of projects that you worked on, and that's usually it. If you do that for like the top 10 or 15 tweets for the role that you're looking at, I can guarantee you will get at least 1 or 2 interviews. Right? So at the end of the day, it also depends on your experience. If you've never done development before and you do something like this and you send a video to somebody on Twitter and you just don't have the experience, then you can't expect anything. But you have reasonable amount of experience and you do this, it's very easy for you to get projects. In fact, this is the number one way we look at, or we get projects these days, because it's just instant, man. And it's like the minute you have a need, I'm there like 5 hours later. Right? So that's it for this episode. We learned about touches, we learned about immediate needs. On Twitter, if you send somebody a message 2 months later, they are not going to close. They're not going to even be interested in what you're selling. Similar to me on LinkedIn, when I posted that job post, after the first 1 or 2 people who I looked at, who I spoke to, I did not speak to anybody else. Right? That's just how things are. I wanted that role closed immediately. I got my interviews immediately. Nobody wants to wait anymore. So try to reach out to people immediately as and when they have the need. Fastest finger first. That's why I personally believe that in the future, a lot of what happens on data is going to be time sensitive, right? You'd want data faster than the next person, not just for stock market needs. If you had more data about a company before somebody else, then you'd be able to either buy the shares at a lower or higher price. If same thing with this, right? If I could find somebody's tweet a little faster than somebody else, then I'd be able to apply to that job much quicker. People get what they want better, faster. You get what you want quicker. You're able to find leads quicker. It's just a win-win for everybody, right? So again, speed is super important. And that's one of the reasons my nickname, at least when it came to gaming and even here, is the Lightning Emperor. Because one thing that I've kind of positioned myself for, even though I do a bunch of different things, is speed, right? I will always change my workflows to a faster workflow, right? And you'll learn more about that in a bit. But that's it for this episode. Catch you on the next. Bye-bye.